and welcome to the Confluence Concerts YouTube channel. My name is Larry Beckwith and I'm very pleased to introduce the pre-show chat for our second program of this online season, A Purcell Remembrance, the Exaltation of Poetry. The concert itself is a cornucopia of performances of the music of the 17th century English composer Henry Purcell, from Victoria, from Montreal, from Amsterdam, and from right here in Toronto. And the concert will premiere on our YouTube channel on Saturday, November the 21st, starting at 7 p.m., and we hope you will join us. Many of the performances in the concert will utilize the original instruments and historical style that we have learned so much about through the early music revival. And indeed, that revival has been responsible for a renewed interest in and love of Purcell's music. By way of an introduction to the program, I thought it would be interesting to speak with one of England's most important and prolific early music scholars and performers. Those of you familiar with Confluence Concerts will know that it is our tradition to have pre-concert chats that illuminate and give context to the music that we will be hearing. For this program, we have reached Andrew Parrott, the founder and conductor of the English early music organization, the Taverner Consort. Andrew is also the author of a number of articles and books on performance practice and normally enjoys a busy international career as a guest conductor. Enjoy. For now, it's a great pleasure to welcome the distinguished conductor and scholar Andrew Parrott to this pre-show chat about Henry Purcell, and it's especially delightful for me because I've been a great fan of your music making for several decades now. In fact, I dug out one of the first recordings of Purcell that I ever owned, which was your recording of Welcome to All the Pleasures and Come Ye Sons of Art, a very beautiful recording from the late 1980s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, Andrew Parrott.
Thank you. Welcome, Larry.
Do you remember your first encounters with the music of Henry Purcell?
To be quite frank, I don't, not the absolute first ones, but I should point out I was not brought up like a lot of my colleagues as an Anglican choir boy, or indeed Anglican at all. I wasn't. So first encounter I do remember, and I remember it quite vividly, though not with a specific piece, was in 1959, which was the whatever anniversary it was of the birth of Purcell and the death of Handel, centenary of Handel. So there was I was brought up in the industrial Midlands, so not quite a wasteland culturally, but not throbbing as parts of it now are with life, musical life. So, but there was a Purcell Handel festival in Wolverhampton, which was nearby, and either my parents took me to it or I dragged them to it, which was more likely at the age of 12, I suppose it was. And I do remember being introduced to the countertenor, as it well still is really, and that's one thing. But to pass on to Handel, also in this church, the parish church in which some of the events took place, had a Renatus Harris organ built in 1684 there, which had been, I don't know whether you or your listeners will know about the Battle of the Organs, but in 1682, 3, 4, the lawyers in London wanted a new instrument, the very best, of course, for the Temple Church, the local church. And they commissioned, first of all, Bernhard Schmidt, Father Smith, who was the established organ builder, the older one. And without his knowledge, they then also set up a competition between him and Renatus Harris. And there were two polarities. Purcell eventually, played at the demonstration for the Smith organ, but the Harris organ, when it failed to win this competition, it doesn't often happen, this sort of thing, it was sent off to Christ Church Cathedral in Dublin, where it remained for, I think, sort of 70, 80 years, something like that, and then came back, and I think it must have got stranded in Wolverhampton, but there going back to this Handel Purcell Festival, was an historical instrument. And in England, as I'm sure you realize, there are very few historical organs. They were all smashed up in the Civil War, and the pipes, metal pipes, melted down for good old, cannon.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the first introduction. And I don't remember particular pieces, but I do remember this is something interesting. There's historical stuff and there's musical stuff there. And Purcell is not just he stands up to comparison with Handel. He's different, but he's great. And the second one was when I went to university, where the senior professor, Jack Westrup, was the author of the book on Purcell. Daniel Purcell, Henry's younger brother, had been organist at Magdalen College in Oxford, where he was. And this is the most important thing. In the Bodleian Library, when I was sort of starting research after the 3 undergraduate years, I was working on English performance practice in 16th and 17th centuries, and there was the autograph score, which I was allowed to touch alone, of Hail Bright Cecilia, 1692 ode, which is just fantastic. I mean,
Yes.
not just a score, but it's a fabulous piece. It's got his annotations of this singer sang that part, that singer that, and you can deduce all sorts of things from it, as well as just sort of seeing this wonderful, clear, bold, straightforward hand, and the mess of sort of, changing that. And
Sure.
sort of, the second performance will do this slightly different. Or yeah. Anyway, so those are my memorable introductions to Purcell. But I was sorry, I should add, sorry if I may, that also I was running the university choir, the School of Cantorum of Oxford, and Tippett, Sir Michael Tippett, who was one of the first people to perform Purcell seriously in England in the war years, the Second World War. He ran the Bath Festival and asked the choir to be the choir to perform in it with him conducting Hail Bright Cecilia. So I got to know that piece then, and then I started sort of thinking about it all in a more refined way. But I was a late beginner, but
Right.
I'm still going strong, I hope, with Purcell.
Now, when you say that Tippett was one of the first conductors to perform Purcell's music, so does that indicate that was he forgotten for a number of years or even centuries, do you think?
No, he wasn't, because in church music, for example,
Right.
the tradition was unbroken, the Anglican tradition. So, there's a wonderful article by George Bernard Shaw where when he was a music critic, he goes to visit a performance of Dido and Aeneas in East End of London. He takes a gun with him just for protection and all the rest of it. It's a wonderful story. So yes, he was known about. I mean, I think large chunks of his music were not performed, and the odd song was. I mean, for example, Nymphs and Shepherds Come Away, which was parodied. Was it Anna Reynolds? Have I got the name wrong? Anna. Anyway, wonderful send up of that,
Yes.
which gives Purcell a bad name. But
Oh, Anna Russell.
Sorry, I mean, respect was turned to Purcell, and a few pieces were known, but we didn't have the broad view of his multifarious skills and output that we now have, I think.
And do you think the reemergence of interest in that came sort of hand in hand with the early music movement?
Well, this comes back to the countertenor thing, because, and I have a sort of very different view from the received view now, but we may or may not come on to that. But Purcell, Tippett, when he was performing Purcell, not just this Hail Bright Cecilia, 1692 ode, but he realized we needed a countertenor. And where do you go to find countertenors? Well, there was said to be one who could actually sing, sort of, not just hide away in the choir, but as a soloist, named Alfred Deller in Canterbury Cathedral. So, and the rest is history, because Tippett then proclaimed this is the countertenor, and I beg to differ, but Alfred Deller, wonderful singer in his way and very influential, then was part of the early music revival, and that was a very important step forward. Yes.
What do you think? This is a very general question, but what do you think it is about? What are the distinctive qualities of Purcell's music that sort of set it apart as being unique and wonderful?
Well, first of all, there are distinctive qualities that set it apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I'm not very good at analyzing things, but what is clear to me, certainly when you've heard bits of his diverse output, um, that he was strongly in an English tradition that goes back to well, the madrigalists, Dowland and all the great Elizabethans, Byrd and so on, and um, he well, his early pieces are very much in that. Actually, William Laws, I don't know whether you've come across William Laws, the two brothers. The one
Mm-hmm.
was wrote all the songs and was very influential in that respect. But William Laws, just a bit strange and experimental and quirky in a wonderful, dare I say, English way, I think. So that harmonic sense is inherited, and Purcell, as I'm sure you know, wrote some wonderful. They were exercises really, but he dates them when he's sort of 16 or something. I've forgotten how old he was, but there, you can see the day on which he wrote this um, um, Pavan or what Pavan, I should say. The stress comes on first of all, whatever it is, and they are wonderful pieces. They are masterpieces at the age of 16. So in that sense, he's a sort of almost a Mozartian because.
Mm-hmm.
He was not just turning out pieces; he was turning out masterpieces early on. Um, where was I going with this? Remind me.
Well, just the sort of stylistic
Of course.
personality
Well, okay,
of
sorry.
Purcell.
Yes, that was the starting point for inherited that, and of course he played the organ and was a member of the Chapel Royal, so he knew all the church music traditions that was carried over after the Civil War into the Restoration. But French music was the big thing, and Lully's music was the model. So he absorbed that quite naturally and study it formally or go to a music conservatory. He just breathed it in, and there were French musicians coming to England, and there were French copies of music coming to England and being performed naturally at court, not least. The court was very Frenchified. And then there was a wave of Italians coming in, and also there were Germans coming in as well. So in London, which is a wonderful melting pot, and the biggest city of Europe, or rather the most cosmopolitan city in Europe, was a wonderful place for him to grow up. And he just what was going on, he just took it in, as Mozart did, um, going to Italy and going to Germany and I mean to France, everywhere in England, but he didn't travel. Purcell, as far as we know, just stayed put in London, and that was enough to give him all the inspirations. So his own style is, it would be, I mean, in some cases it's a synthesis of that. Sometimes it's an imitation of that. Sometimes it's just Purcell and you can't put your finger on it, and that's probably the greatest Purcell. And it's
Right.
such a shame that he didn't live longer, because it's not that these are all beginners' works, but we want more of them. We want more of the mature ones, if you like,
Yeah.
and more substantial ones, I think, because there are lots of little fragments and you think that is just brilliant, and
Yeah.
12 bars, or that harmonic turn. And it's not that he couldn't sustain larger canvases, right on larger canvases, but he didn't really have that opportunity very often. And again, I come back to the 1692. That's what, 45 minutes or something, a good span, and it's just brilliant. It really
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, one of the things that strikes me about Purcell too is that he seemed to travel with such ease through the all of the societies in London. I mean, he was a great favorite of the monarchs. He was obviously a superstar in the church music world. And then he became the darling of the theater world,
Yeah,
when everybody, all the playwrights, wanted
yeah,
to have him include songs and music in their
yeah.
plays. And then he also seemed to be very comfortable, taking people out to the pub. I mean, there are no there. I know there are very few stories,
Mhm.
about him, but he wrote these alehouse songs and sort of rather um, fruity catches and everything as
Filthy, I
well.
think you could say. Some of them,
So
yes.
I just think, I mean, if you maybe you could talk a little bit about just the ease in which he seemed to move at such a young age through the English and the society of London.
Well, in a way, it's his career is, I mean, his life it's a microcosm of what was going on, because London was not the big place that it is. It was big, but and the court was at the centre of it. But somebody who sang in Westminster Abbey Choir could also be a member of the Chapel Royal. So just go over the road when the Chapel Royal is in London or at Westminster, and you're singing that. So you're in two choirs at once, and yes, in the evenings you may be employed by the Playhouse for something else, or and of course, after you've been performing with these people, and you go to a pub, and because that's healthy water to drink, isn't it? That's the reason people drink it, isn't it? And you have fun there. And of course, that even that ignores one whole important strand of Purcell's music, which is the domestic music, because we don't. I mean, do people write private devotional music nowadays? I would say it's not a big market for that. We say they write church music, and often these are in categories. If it's very interesting to ask what he would have been like today. I mean, he would have probably been seduced by television and Hollywood and everything. How he would have balanced it, how it worked out, who can guess? But he would have been capable of doing all these things, whether it was the best sort of career choice in terms of our retrospective need for him to have written, great pieces in that genre or that genre. But he had to earn a living, and I don't think he prostituted himself at any stage. There was always opportunity, and of course he was born into a musical family, so the contacts were already there. Not that, so he didn't need to. He didn't need to emerge from some northern village and prove himself. He was. It was clear that he was rather musical, and as a boy singer, selected with others, and he was surrounded by really comparably versatile musicians. So he wasn't exceptional in that sense. The quality is what makes him exceptional, not the diversity of what he does. I would say.
That's a good point. Yes, yeah. What do you think the lasting impact is of Purcell on English music? I mean, I know he was a great influence on Benjamin Britten, for instance. But how do you see Purcell's influence going forward?
Well, from here, well, I was just before that tricky question. Well, my subconscious thinks of an answer. He was an influence on Handel, because when Handel arrived, just I suppose a decade or so after Purcell's death, his untimely death, Handel wanted to know what Purcell was and what English music was about, and he clearly did admire it, and he does his usual thing of not quite copying it, but feeding off it very, very healthily. The bad thing, if I put it this way, is, in my view, that Handel sort of wrecked the excellent English tradition of setting English words, because Handel's English was never, I mean, yes, he was fluent in the sense of that he communicated very clearly and quickly, but it was not very stylish, shall we say. And some of his word setting is really, really bad. And it would never have happened in Purcell's day. Because with Purcell's word setting, I mean, that goes back to, to Dowland, if you like, and the Madrigalist, where whether you like the words or not, or whether they mean things to us nowadays, not, but they are set exquisitely well. And of course, there are the Shakespeare songs as well, which bring the literary tradition, keep that alive in music. But Handel was such a strong role model for all the reasons we know. I mean, he's an excellent composer, but his word setting does not match other aspects of his composition. And English composers, I think, got lazier about word setting and just turned it out, which is a bad influence. I mean, it is difficult to know, because Handel had a longer career and a bigger career, a more international career. So he doesn't make the same impact to us nowadays. But running, I think even when he's just a name for most people in English music in the 19th century, he's still alive in the church music and fantastic funeral music, apart from anything else. And two sets, an early one of three funeral sentences, a man that is born of a woman, and so on, and then the shorter, simpler, more homophonic settings for the funeral of Queen Mary and performed at his own funeral as well. So lasting impact, well, he's always been there because we felt slightly apologetic that, well, the accusation from Germany and elsewhere has been that we are das Land ohne Musik, the land without music. Well, there is some truth of that to that in the quality of some of most 19th century music. But if we go before that, that is absolutely not true. England was right up there with any other thing, going right back to Dunstable and possibly before. So he's always been there as a sort of hope in a way. Purcell, we've got our man, well, now we've got Elgar eventually in the Edwardian period. And yes, but I think the impact is still not known because we're only just beginning to know the fuller range of Purcell's music, and actually there is still a lot that I've never encountered myself. So maybe I should turn to listening to or looking at some more music.
I'm going to end the interview just sort of bringing it full circle. I asked you about your first encounters with Purcell. How does Purcell endure in your life as a musician? What role does Purcell play in your work now?
Well, if I had the power, which you may assume I do have, to dictate what I perform, then I would be performing a lot of Purcell. Partly not because we need more recordings or those pieces haven't been recorded, but I still got some thoughts which I think about the style in which he's performed, which do affect your perception of what the piece is. That there are certain misconceptions or shortcuts, and in a way that goes back to Handel, though I can't blame him, because we tend to think we now know how to perform Baroque music, and that's sort of like Handel. But Purcell is, yes, okay, it's only a generation or a bit later, but it's a very crucial distinction. And if you Handelianize, is that a verb, Purcell, some of it can work, and some of it, to my mind, does not work as well as it should do. So if I were in a position, and of course with lockdown, I'm doing absolutely no conducting at all, then I would, that would be one important thing to do, I think, to try and to influence the possible way of to influence the way that other people hear and view Purcell. And I think it's a pity that in a way that there aren't more substantial works, because I think the theatre works are so fragmentary. In a way, it's incidental music with great bits in it. We've got Dido, which is a gem for a small thing, and we've got the odes, which sometimes have obsequious words, which make it a little bit difficult to palate.
Cheapen them a bit, yeah.
That's right. So I wish there were more Purcell. It's not his fault. It's not our fault. It's the fault of circumstances. And if he'd lived longer, maybe that would have happened.
Thank you so much for this interview, and it's great to see you, and wonderful to hear that you are thriving as a scholar and a musician. And let's hope that we can all get back to making music live very soon.
I hope so too. Yes, and I hope you enjoy this concert. I shall miss it, but there we are.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Larry.